Ever get that feeling? Like you're staring at a map and your eyes just lock onto one of those tiny little countries, the ones that seem to have a story way bigger than their actual size.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. There's always a sense of mystery there, like what's going on in that little spot.
Exactly. And today we're going deep, really deep into one of those places, Vaticanstad.
Ah, Vatican City, a truly unique place. Probably wouldn't even need to zoom in on most maps to see it.
Seriously. For this deep dive, we've got some great material to work with. Excerpts from the Wikipedia page on Vaticanstad.
A classic. Always a good place to start. It's like a one-stop shop for the basics.
Absolutely. But we're going beyond the basics. Think of this as your crash course on everything interesting, surprising, and important about this whole giant. Because honestly, when it comes to influence, it punches way above its weight class.
All right, so let's start with the official stuff, setting the stage for our listeners. Officially, it's the State of Vatican City, or, if you're feeling fancy, Stato della Città del Vaticano in Italian.
Very nice. And speaking of Italian, that's what you'll mostly hear around Vatican City. But it shares official language status with another one. Any guesses?
I think our listeners can probably guess this one. It's Latin, the language of the church.
You got it. And when we talk about capital, well, it gets pretty straightforward here. The capital is Vatican City itself.
A classic city-state. It's as pure as it gets. And in terms of how it's governed, it's a theocracy, a unitary state with the Pope as the top dog. Right now, that's Pope Francis.
Head of state setting the spiritual direction, but there's also a head of government handling the day-to-day, Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin.
And no surprises here, the main religion is Roman Catholic.
Now for the fun part, size. It's tiny. We're talking 0.44 square kilometers. And get this, 0% of that is water. I mean, you could probably walk across the whole country in an afternoon.
Yeah, I'd say a good brisk walk would do it.
Okay.
And for you, the listener, if you're trying to picture this, imagine a decent-sized park that's probably bigger than Vatican City.
Unbelievable, right? But despite its size, it still has a population of around 1,000 people. Back in 2000, it was even smaller, closer to 800. Imagine how packed it must feel.
Definitely a high population density there. March 13th, by the way, is their national day. It commemorates Pope Francis I becoming Pope.
Good to know. Now, here's where things get really interesting. You might think, okay, it's in Italy, so it's probably just like an extension of Italy. But not so fast.
Not even close. Vatican City is totally independent. It's got its own thing going on, uses the euro, same as Italy, but they can mint their own coins, often with the Pope's face on them.
Imagine having your face on a coin. Talk about influence. And they've got their own internet code, .va, and a unique phone code too, plus 379.
Now, let's go back in time for a bit. I think a lot of people probably think Vatican City has been around forever, slowly shrinking over time.
Yeah.
But that's not actually the case, right?
Nope, not at all. It's actually a pretty recent creation, 1929 to be exact, born out of the Lateran Treaty.
Yes. The Lateran Treaty. A deal struck between Pope Pius XI and Benito Mussolini. It's a fascinating bit of history. And the treaty specifically stated that this was a brand new state, not just a leftover piece of the old papal states.
Huge distinction. It was a deliberate act to create this new entity. And when it comes to the legal stuff, Vatican City is represented by the Holy See. It's like the legal and diplomatic face of the Catholic Church worldwide.
So we're talking about more than just the physical territory. It's about the Catholic Church's authority as a global institution. And the Vatican itself, that physical space, acts as the central hub for the administration of the whole church. That's where the Pope's official residence is, the Apostolic Palace.
It's like the command center for a global faith. And for those who are curious, there's a unique situation when there's no pope called a sede vacante. It's like an interregnum, and during that time, the Camerlengo, a high-ranking cardinal, steps in to handle things.
Think of it like a caretaker for the church until a new pope is chosen. Now, you mentioned something earlier that caught my attention. Some academics actually question whether Vatican City truly qualifies as a state. What's the reasoning there?
It's a fascinating debate. Some scholars argue that it doesn't quite fit the traditional definition of a state. It doesn't have a permanent population in the usual sense, and its economy is very closely tied to its religious mission, which is quite different from most countries.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Is a state defined solely by its territory and population, or is there something more? In Vatican City's case, some argue its primary purpose is about ensuring the Pope's freedom and the Church's independence, not necessarily the traditional functions of a state.
It's a really thought-provoking point. So even though it functions as a state, there's this underlying question about what truly defines statehood. It's a unique case for sure. And despite this debate, it does act like a sovereign entity on the world stage.
Oh, absolutely. It's not part of the EU, not part of the Council of Europe, but it engages with loads of international organizations, and its cultural and historical significance is undeniable, recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site since 1984.
Exactly. It's like a tiny country with a global reach. Now, to understand how we got here, we need a little history lesson. For centuries, the Pope wasn't just a spiritual leader, he actually ruled a pretty big chunk of Italy, right?
That's right. For centuries, there were the Papal States, a large area in central Italy directly controlled by the Pope. But things changed dramatically in the 19th century. 1866 saw a big loss of territory, and then in 1870, Rome itself was annexed by the Kingdom of Italy. It was a major power shift.
And how did the Pope react to that? To suddenly losing all that temporal power?
It caused a huge rift between the papacy and the Italian state. The popes at the time basically considered themselves prisoners in the Vatican. For almost 60 years, they refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of the Italian annexation of Rome.
That's some serious tension, and it lasted for decades. It wasn't until the Lateran Treaty in 1929, the same one that created Vatican City, that this situation was finally resolved.
A fascinating period of history, for sure. Now, back to the size of Vatican City. It's hard to overstate just how small it is.
I mean, we said it's like a park, but to really drive it home, St. Peter's Basilica alone, just that one building, takes up 7% of the whole country. Add in St. Peter's Square, and you're looking at a whopping 21% of Vatican City.
It's incredible. So much packed into such a small space. That's why it's considered the most urbanized independent area in the world.
Every inch seems to have a purpose. Now, here's another twist. The Holy See, which we talked about earlier, actually owns properties all over Italy, not just within Vatican City.
That's right. Lots of churches and office buildings scattered throughout Italy, especially Rome, belong to the Vatican.
But if they're in Italy, are they really part of Vatican City?
Not technically. They're geographically within Italy, but they have this special status. It's called extraterritoriality. Sort of like embassies. These properties fall under Vatican jurisdiction, not Italian. It's all spelled out in the Lateran Treaty.
So it's like having little pieces of Vatican City sprinkled throughout Italy. I'm curious, what are some of these places? Give us a little tour.
Well, right in Rome, there's the whole San Giovanni and Laterano complex. A big basilica, buildings around it, even the Scala Santa, which are these famous holy stairs.
I've heard of those. Very significant for Catholics.
Then there's Santa Maria Maggiore, another major basilica, and St. Paul outside the walls, again with all of the surrounding buildings. And it's not just churches. Palaces like Palazzo della Cancelleria, Palazzo di Propaganda Fide, and Palazzo di San Callisto in Trastevere, they're all extraterritorial too.
So many important buildings.
Oh, and I'm not even done. Palazzo Sant'Ufficio, which houses the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. Palazzo dei Convertenti for the Eastern churches. And then there's the Vicariato Paeus. Some offices of the Diocese of Rome are still there. And most of Palazzo delle Congregazioni ai Propylei and Palazzo Pio, they're extraterritorial too. And let's not forget the Pontificio Seminario, Romano Minore, and tons of buildings on the Janiculum Hill, like the Pontifical Roman Athenaeum as Apollinaire, the Ukrainian Pontifical College of St. Josaphat, the Pontifical North American College, and the Bambino Gesù Children's Hospital, for instance.
Wow. That's a serious presence in Rome, even beyond Vatican City. It's almost like a miniature Vatican spread throughout the city.
It really is. And it doesn't stop there. Outside of Rome, there's Castel Gandolfo, the Papal Palace, Villa Barberini, Villa Chiabo, and all the beautiful gardens. Those are extraterritorial as well.
Okay, I'm starting to understand how vast the reach is.
And for a more modern example, there's the area in Santa Maria di Galleria. That's where the Vatican radio antennas are. Italy actually gifted that land to the Holy See back in 1951.
Amazing. It's like a puzzle. All these pieces of Vatican City fit into Italy, but separate. Now, I can't talk about Vatican City without mentioning those iconic landmarks.
Right. These are the images that come to mind for most people. And for your listeners, it's worth pointing out that all these landmarks are part of that UNESCO World Heritage Site we mentioned earlier. So, of course, there's St. Peter's Basilica and that massive St. Peter's Square.
Awe-inspiring. And don't forget the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo at his best. And then the Vatican museums, packed with incredible art and historical treasures.
You can spend days in those museums and still not see everything.
Absolutely. And then there are the Vatican Gardens, a peaceful escape in the middle of it all, and of course the Apostolic Palace, the Pope's official residence.
Truly iconic sites. And for all the serious researchers out there, there's also the Vatican Apostolic Library and the Vatican Secret Archives.
Secret archives always sounds so mysterious, doesn't it?
Definitely sparks the imagination. But access is usually only granted to accredited scholars, unfortunately. So, those secrets are well kept. Now let's talk about the people who call Vatican City home. We mentioned the population is around 1,000, but that number is actually shrinking.
Who are these people living in the world's smallest state?
Well, it's not your typical neighborhood. Most residents are clergy priests, nuns, those dedicated to religious life. Then there's the famous Swiss Guard, responsible for protecting the Pope.
Those colorful uniforms are hard to miss.
And there are about 3,000 lay employees, mostly Italian citizens. But they tend to live outside of Vatican City.
I'm curious, how do you become a citizen of such a unique place? Is it like any other country?
Not really. You can't just be born there and automatically become a citizen. Vatican citizenship is granted through naturalization, usually tied to working for the Holy See.
So it's very selective.
Very much so. And most citizens actually hold dual nationality, meaning they're also citizens of another country.
That makes sense. But is there any perk to being a Vatican citizen?
Well, for one, you don't need a visa to get in. And, fun fact, for such a small place, they have a remarkably high literacy rate. Almost everyone there can read and write.
That's amazing. Clearly, education is valued there. So how does this all work? Who is running the show?
Well, Vatican City has its own administrative service, totally separate from the Roman Curia, which is the central administration of the Catholic Church itself.
Mm-hmm.
And a key thing to note is that most of the power rests with men. All the top positions are held by men, including the Pope.
Right, and the Pope is elected by the College of Cardinals, who are also all men. And it's worth noting that in terms of women's and LGBT rights, well, things are quite different compared to many other nations.
That's putting it mildly.
Okay, so we've got the administration, but what about the laws? Who makes them?
That would be the Pontifical Commission for Vatican City State. 5 cardinals, led by a president, but nothing becomes law without the Pope's approval. He has the final say.
Checks and balances, Vatican style.
And when it comes to legal matters, they have a whole court system. A court of first instance, a court of appeal, and a court of cassation. They handle all the civil and criminal cases.
So it's a serious legal system. What kind of laws do they have? Do they make them all up themselves?
Actually, most of their laws are based on Italian law, unless, of course, Vatican law specifically overrides them. And since 2009, any Italian law that applies to Vatican City needs explicit approval from the Vatican.
So it's a mix of borrowing and creating their own. It's kind of like they have their own legal starter kit based on Italy's, but can customize it as needed.
A good way to think about it. And day to day, the Vatican City State Governorate, also called the Governatorato, is in charge. They handle all the practical stuff, always under the Pope's authority, of course.
They've got their own fire department, a police force called the Gendarmerie, and of course the Swiss Guard keeping the Pope safe. It's a fully functioning government, just on a miniature scale. Now, this tiny state has to pay its bills somehow, right?
Well, they use the euro, as we mentioned. They even mint their own coins, all thanks to a monetary agreement, first with Italy and now with the European Central Bank.
Smart move. And then there's the Vatican Bank, officially known as the Institute for Religious Works.
Right. Reports suggest that the Catholic Church, based in the Vatican, holds assets worth billions of euros.
Wow. A tiny state with massive financial resources. Makes you wonder how they move all that money around. Do they even have transportation in such a small space?
Well, they don't have an airport, which isn't surprising given the size. But they do have a heliport, mainly for VIPs and church officials.
Makes sense. Otherwise, it'd be a very short flight.
But here's the surprising part. They have their own train station.
Wait a minute, a train station in a country smaller than some people's backyards.
Yep, it's mainly used for freight, though. Just a few passenger services.
It's almost too much to imagine a whole train station in such a tiny space.
Talk about maximizing space. Now, let's not forget their sports scene. They have the men's Vatican City national football team.
I've actually heard of that. Any other sporting achievements?
Well, there's Rian Schurhus, a Dutch cyclist who made history in 2022. He was the first person to compete in the World Road Cycling Championships representing Vatican City.
How did that happen?
It was a unique situation. His wife was the Australian ambassador to the Holy See at the time. Talk about a diplomatic perk.
It's incredible how this little city-state keeps popping up in unexpected places, even in the world of sports. But how does Vatican City actually get its message out?
Well, they're definitely not shy about communication. They've got an official website, as you'd expect these days, and they run their own radio station and television station.
So they're covering all the bases.
Absolutely. And don't forget their newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano. That's their daily paper, keeping everyone informed.
Okay, before we finish up, I have to ask about something that caught my eye in our research. The Wikipedia page mentions something rather shocking: the highest crime rate per capita globally. Isn't that a bit strange for such a small, seemingly secure place?
It is an attention-grabbing statistic for sure. But you have to understand the context. It's not like there's a crime wave happening in Vatican City. The high crime rate is mostly due to petty theft, things like pickpocketing, targeted at tourists, and there are millions of them visiting St. Peter's Square every year.
So it's more about opportunity than actual danger.
Exactly. It's a numbers game. Lots of tourists in a small space, unfortunately, means more chances for petty crime. It's something to be aware of, but not necessarily a cause for alarm.
Makes sense. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive into Vatican. So much more to it than meets the eye.
It really is fascinating. A reminder that even the smallest places can have global significance. It's a unique blend of history, religion, and statehood, all packed into a few city blocks. And it makes you think about what truly defines a nation and its influence in the world.
For sure, it's not just about size, it's about the impact you have. We've learned about a newly created state, established in 1929, operating within a historical context that spans centuries. We've seen how a place smaller than many parks can house the central administration of a global religion and hold immense diplomatic weight on the world stage.
Exactly. And this deep dive has given us insights you wouldn't get from just a quick news report. It makes you think. How can such a tiny area wield such religious and diplomatic power on a global scale? What does this tell us about the nature of influence and sovereignty in a world that's increasingly interconnected?
It's a paradox that I think our listeners can ponder. Vatican City challenges our assumptions about size, power, and what it truly means to be a nation. And on that note, we'd like to thank you all for joining us on this exploration of Vaticanstad. Until next time.